I've always thought my marriage to Rachel was perfect. We had been together for 10 years, had a son, a cozy home, and shared many common values. One of those values was charity. We often talked about the importance of helping those in difficult circumstances. It united us and made us feel like we were making the world a better place together. One day, we decided to become regular donors to a large charity that helped families with children. Rachel was very inspired by this idea, and I supported her as well. We started donating money regularly, attending charity events, and communicating with other donors. It became a part of our life together. At one of these events, we met John, the head of the foundation. He was a man who seemed to be the perfect embodiment of what it means to devote your life to a noble cause. His speeches were always inspirational, and his charisma drew the attention of everyone present. Rachel was mesmerized by him. I could see her eyes burning as she listened to him speak. At first I thought it was just a fascination with his ideas, but as it turned out later, it was something more. John often organized private meetings with donors to discuss the foundation's future plans. He invited Rachel and me to one of these meetings. It was a cozy dinner in a small restaurant. John spoke about the foundation's successes and showed us photos of the children he had helped. It was touching, and we were both grateful for the opportunity to be a part of this work. However, even then I began to notice Rachel changing. She often talked about John, his dedication to the cause, and how much he did for others. It didn't bother me at first because we both admired his work, but over time, her conversations became more personal. She would mention his jokes, talk about how he could relate to people, how he inspired her. My suspicions began to grow when she suggested that I volunteer at the foundation. Rachel had always been busy with work, but now she found time to volunteer. Her enthusiasm seemed strange to me, but I didn't want to question her decision. I thought she just wanted to help more, and I even felt proud of her. But her behavior became more and more strange. One evening, while we were having dinner at home, Rachel received a text message on her phone. She quickly read it and hid the phone in her bag. I asked who it was, but she said it was just a colleague from the foundation. Her voice was calm, but I could sense a tension in her words. It was the first time I wondered if everything was okay. My concern began to grow when I noticed that Rachel was staying at events longer than usual. She would come back late, explaining that she needed to help organize the foundation's work. Once she even said that she was going to go to a neighboring city for a few days to help organize a big charity event. I supported her because it seemed like an important cause, but at the same time, I felt that something was changing between us. After her trip, I decided to check out the foundation's social media page. I saw photos from the event in which Rachel was standing next to John. They were smiling, looking very close. My heart sank. They were just pictures, but they made me anxious. Was there something more between them than just work? I started to observe her behavior more. She became less open with me, less likely to tell me about her plans. Her phone was always with her, even at night. I tried to find an explanation for this, but I couldn't understand anything. Thoughts were running through my head that she was hiding something. My suspicion grew into certainty when I saw her correspondence with John. One evening, when she left her phone in the kitchen, I decided to take a look. It was a terrible feeling to violate her privacy, but I could no longer contain my doubts. Their messages were full of flirtation, jokes, and compliments. They wrote to each other how happy they were to meet at events, and even discuss plans for the future. That was the moment when I realized that our marriage was no longer the same. Rachel was not only passionate about the foundation's work, she was involved in a relationship with its head. This discovery shattered my view of our family. I sat in the kitchen, holding her phone in my hands, and didn't know what to do next. I had to make a decision, whether to tell her directly or try to find out more before jumping to conclusions. Either way, I knew that our lives would never be the same again. After the night I found Rachel's correspondence with John, I could no longer ignore my suspicions. Thousands of thoughts were running through my head. How could this have happened? What exactly had led to this situation? I decided not to jump to any conclusions, but every day my anxiety only increased. I began to notice more and more disturbing details. Rachel would often leave the house late at night, explaining that she was working on the foundation's projects. Her phone, which used to be always in the living room or kitchen, was now her constant companion. She avoided talking about John, although until recently, she couldn't stop talking about him. One day, I decided to talk to a friend who worked as a technical specialist. We agreed to meet in a cafe, and I told him everything that had happened. He advised me to install a program to recover deleted messages on Rachel's phone. I hesitated for a long time because it was a direct invasion of her personal space. But the desire to find out the truth won out. The program helped me recover some of the deleted messages. What I saw made me hold my breath. Their messages were too personal, full of subtle flirting and innuendo. John invited Rachel to meetings that were not work-related. In one message, he even wrote that he wanted to spend more time with her alone. My suspicions became certainty. I decided to check one more thing. At one of the Foundation's events, I noticed that John often took pictures with the participants. These photos were then posted on the Foundation's social media. I started looking through these pictures. Among the dozens of photos with other donors, there were some where he and Rachel were standing next to each other. Their poses, their looks, it didn't look like a normal working interaction. They looked too close. I began to feel anger, which was difficult to control. But at the same time, I didn't want to make a scandal until I knew all the details. I knew that any mistake could destroy our marriage completely. I decided to gather more evidence to prepare for a serious conversation with Rachel. A few days later, I decided to spy on her. It was humiliating, but I couldn't live in the dark anymore. One evening, when she said she was going to a meeting with her colleagues, I decided to follow her. She went to a restaurant where I saw her sit down at a table with John. They were having dinner, laughing, and their body language said more than words. I sat in my car in the parking lot and felt my anger change to deep disappointment. After that night, I realized it was time to act. I couldn't hold it in any longer. I decided to talk to her directly and ask her what was going on between them. It was one of the hardest conversations of my life. When Rachel came home, I immediately asked her about John. She tried to avoid answering, saying that it was just a working relationship. But I wasn't going to give up that easily. I showed her the screenshots of their correspondence that I managed to recover. Her face turned pale and her eyes filled with tears. She admitted that there were feelings between her and John, but she assured me that it didn't go beyond flirting. She said that she felt lonely, that she lacked attention from me. Her words were painful, but I realized that I may have contributed to what happened. I was always busy with work and had little time for my family. But did that justify her behavior? Rachel asked me to forgive her. She said she wanted to save our family, that she was ready to stop all communication with John. But could I believe her? Could I trust her again after everything that had happened? I suggested that we go to family therapy to try to sort out our problems. She agreed. This was the first step towards rebuilding our marriage, but I realized that we had a long and difficult road ahead of us. The next few weeks were full of emotional stress. We visited a therapist, talked a lot about our feelings and what went wrong in our relationship. I tried to understand her, but the pain of her betrayal remained. Rachel also tried to change. She deleted all contacts with John, stopped participating in the Foundation's events. I could see that she was trying, but was it enough? I started spending more time with our son. He was the reason I didn't want to give up. His smile reminded me that family is the most important thing. But was it possible to restore what we had lost? This question remained unanswered. After the first few sessions of therapy, I felt that Rachel and I were moving in the right direction. But despite this, the pain and distrust did not let go of me. She did everything she could to show her commitment to the family. She started spending more time at home, cooking our favorite meals, and more often suggested spending evenings together. It seemed like she really wanted to fix her mistakes. But could I let go of what had happened so easily? One of the hardest moments came when I met John by chance on the street. I was in the city center on business when I saw him. He was walking with someone who looked like one of the Foundation's donors. My heart sank, and a wave of anger rose in me. I couldn't help myself and approached him. He looked calm and even a little surprised to see me. "We need to talk," I said. He nodded, and we stepped aside. I did not hold back my emotions. I asked him directly what he was doing with my wife, and how dare he interfere in our lives. He replied that there was nothing serious between them, that it was just a sympathy that never crossed the line. But I didn't believe him. His words seemed too convenient, like a ready-made excuse to avoid conflict. I warned him to stay away from Rachel and our family. He assured me he was no longer in contact with her, and I left, leaving him behind. But the encounter only made me more doubtful and angry. At home, I told Rachel about our conversation. She looked upset and said she didn't know I had met him. She reiterated that she had cut all ties with him and didn't want to hear anything more about him. Her words sounded sincere, but I still had a feeling inside me that this story was not over yet. Over the next few weeks, I tried to regain control of my emotions. Rachel and I continued to attend therapy, and it helped us understand each other better. I began to realize that our problem was not only her flirting with John, but also that we had lost touch with each other long before that. One day, our psychologist suggested an exercise for us, to write letters to each other expressing our feelings, experiences, and hopes. It was a difficult step for me, because I was not used to opening up even to myself, let alone to someone else. But I decided to try. In my letter, I admitted how much I felt betrayed and humiliated. I wrote how painful it was to learn that the person I love could betray my trust. But I also wrote that I wanted to try to forgive her if she was willing to work on our relationship. Rachel responded with a letter of her own. She admitted that her feelings for John stemmed from her loneliness. She explained that she lacked attention from me and that she felt invisible. But she also wrote that she realized her mistake and that it was important for her to rebuild our family. These letters were a moment of epiphany for both of us. We started talking more about our feelings and what was bothering us. But even with this progress, I couldn't completely shake the feeling that John's shadow was still hanging over us. One day, while cleaning, I found a box with Rachel's things related to the foundation. It contained photos, postcards, and notes. Among them, I saw a note from John. In it, he thanked Rachel for her support and wrote that she was a special person who made him believe in the best. The note was dated a few months before it all started. I decided to show it to Rachel. She was confused and said that she had forgotten about the existence of this note. She said it was just a token of appreciation and that she hadn't given it much thought. But for me, it was a reminder of how it all started. I felt that this episode put us on the border between the past and the future. We decided it was time to let go of all ties to the past. Rachel agreed to hand over all her responsibilities at the foundation to someone else. It was a difficult decision for her, because charity has been an important part of her life. But she said she was willing to do it for our family. The following months were a challenge for both of us. We tried to build a new life, free from the shadow of the past. I started to spend more time with my family, we planned trips together, and worked on joint projects. Rachel also changed. She became more open, sharing her thoughts and feelings more often. But despite all our efforts, I still felt it was hard to fully forgive her. I knew it wasn't her fault, but rather my struggle with myself. I realized that forgiveness is not an instant act, but a long process that takes time and patience. We both decided that we would continue to work on our relationship. It was not an easy road, but we were ready to walk it together. Sometimes I asked myself if it was worth saving our marriage. But every time I saw our family together, I realized that it was worth fighting for. However, the question of trust remained open. Would I ever be able to trust Rachel completely again? And would we be able to build a new future, leaving the past behind? The following months were the greatest challenge for Rachel and me. Despite our attempts to put the past behind us, his shadow was constantly reminding us. I felt like we were moving forward, but every little memory of John or the events surrounding him brought me back to feelings of anger and betrayal. It was a difficult period that required patience and strength from both of us. One day, as I was working in my office, Rachel came into the room. She looked worried. She was holding her phone and said that John had texted her again. The message was short, asking for a meeting to discuss some outstanding issues related to her involvement with the foundation. She assured me that she wasn't going to respond, but the fact that he was trying to contact her again brought up a storm of emotions. I felt the anger that I had been trying to suppress all these months returning. I began to ask her why he was still writing, if she had left any reason for him to think she was ready to contact her. Rachel tried to calm me down, but I couldn't help myself. I reminded her of everything we'd been through and how hard it was for me to trust her after what had happened. This argument became one of the most heated in our marriage. I felt like I was on the brink again, but this time not because of John, but because of my own doubts. We talked for a long time, exchanging mutual accusations, but eventually we came to the point where we were both exhausted. Rachel suggested that we finally change our phone number to stop all contact with him. The next morning, she did indeed change the number and deleted all the messages. It was a symbolic gesture, but it was meaningful to me. It showed that she was willing to make sacrifices for our family. Despite this, my trust remained fragile. One day, when my son and I were walking in the park, he asked me, "Why does Mom get sad so often?" These words pierced me to the core. Jake could feel the tension we were trying to hide from him. I realized that our struggle with Rachel was not only affecting us, but also our son. It made me wonder if I had been focusing too much on my hurt feelings, forgetting what was important. I decided to talk to Rachel again. This time our conversation was calmer. I told her that I wanted to try to put everything behind me, but that we needed to work together to do that. We agreed not to revisit the subject of John and to focus on our future. It wasn't just an agreement, it was a joint promise. We decided to go on a journey that had been in our plans for a long time. It was an opportunity to spend time together, away from everything that held us captive in the past. The trip was a turning point. We talked a lot about our lives, recalling happy moments that helped us feel why we had been together for so many years. This trip gave us both the opportunity to reboot our relationship. We returned home with new strength and determination. Rachel started spending more time with her family, and I tried to be more attentive and supportive. We both realized that our problems had started long before John came along, and now it was time to fix things. When I returned to normal life, I felt that our relationship was gradually changing. We became closer. We talked about our feelings more often, not being afraid to be frank. This did not mean that all the problems disappeared, but now we had a common goal. Despite everything, the shadow of the past still sometimes made itself felt. One evening, as we sat on the terrace drinking tea, Rachel asked me if I would ever be able to fully forgive her. I thought about it, and then answered that forgiveness is a process that takes time, but I was ready to work on it. This conversation was an important step for us. It showed that we were both ready to make efforts to save our family. We knew that there was still a lot of work to be done, but now we were confident that together we could overcome all the difficulties. This culmination of our story was not only a moment of crisis, but also a point of reset. We realized that we cannot change the past, but we can change our future. This gave us hope and strength to move forward without looking back. A few months after our trip, I started to feel that our life was becoming stable again. We talked to each other more, laughed more, and spent more time together as a family. But despite all the positive changes, I realized that the process of rebuilding trust was not yet complete. The scars of betrayal remained, and even the best moments could not completely hide them. Rachel focused on her work, but now chose projects that allowed her to spend more time at home. She became more active in our family life. She organized outings, helped Jake with his studies, and even suggested that we start a family tradition of weekly dinners together. I could see how hard she was trying, and it inspired me to keep working on our relationship. Despite this, I still sometimes caught myself looking at her phone or paying attention to her words more than necessary. It wasn't an act of suspicion, but rather my fear that it might happen again. I realized that this was not helping us move forward, and I tried to suppress these impulses. One day, Jake came home from school with a project he had been working on. He was supposed to draw his family. In the drawing, we were all together, me, Rachel, and him, all smiling. This drawing made me think about how important it is for our family to stay together. Jake was the thread that tied us together and reminded us why we were doing all this. I decided to do something special for Rachel. It had been a long time since we had an evening just for us. I organized a dinner at home, cooked her favorite dishes, lit candles, and put on the music we used to listen to when we first started dating. She was touched. We talked all evening, reminiscing about how we met, sharing our plans for the future. It was the moment when I felt that we could really leave the past behind. But the real breakthrough happened when we both realized that forgiveness is not just words, but an action. It was evident in the way we started to support each other. I started sharing my thoughts more, talking about my feelings, even if it was difficult. Rachel, in turn, listened more, tried to understand what I was feeling. Our work on our relationship paid off. We started planning for the future, which we hadn't talked about for a long time. We decided to take a short break from work and spend time together in the mountains. It was time for us, no phones, no responsibilities, just us and nature. This trip helped us strengthen our bond and reminded us why we got married. When I returned home, I felt that something had changed. I no longer looked at Rachel through the prism of betrayal. I saw her as a person who had made mistakes, but had done her best to correct her mistakes. This didn't mean that the pain was completely gone, but it became a part of our story, not the defining part. At one of our last therapy sessions, the psychologist told us, "You can't change the past, but you can change how you react to it." These words became a starting point for me. I realized that by holding on to the hurt feelings, I was causing my own pain. Letting go of the past was difficult, but necessary. Rachel also went through her own journey. She realized how important it was to be honest not only with me, but also with herself. She no longer tried to avoid taking responsibility for her actions, but she also didn't let the past determine her future. It was an act of maturity for both of us. The ending of this story is not perfect, but it is real. We did not become the same couple we were before all this, but we have become stronger, more open, and closer to each other. Our family has passed the test, and it has given us a new chance. What would you do in our place? Would you be able to forgive betrayal to save your family? Share your thoughts in the comments.